The song that you hear is called Blackwater Blues. It's written and performed by Bessie Smith. She speaks upon the historical tragedy that we call the 1927 Great Mississippi River Flood. This great flood spanned over 7 states and 26,000 square miles of the Mississippi Valley. The great force of this flood took over 500,000 people from their homes. The Mississippi River is the largest river in North America. However, it's unlike some rivers that you may know here in North Carolina. It's a part of a 15,000-mile system, and the soil that encompasses this river is soft with clay and sand. Its muddy characteristics make it very difficult to predict and control. The Mississippi is drained by half of the continental United States, and it flows all of that water to the Gulf of Mexico. Prior to the disaster in 1927, the people who lived in the towns and the cities oversaw the building and the maintenance of their local levee systems. Early levees that were made were to be unreliable and poorly constructed. The idea that local people needed to construct their own levees started in 1917, and this was because of the seasonal rains would often flood their local areas. For these people, they lived in constant fear. The idea was that the levees were the sole way of controlling the Mississippi floods. It was thought that these floods could be centralized and eventually passed down to the Gulf of Mexico in the presence of these levees. The man-made levees spanned from 30 to 40 feet tall in size and ran over 1,000 miles of the river on both sides. What led up to the disaster in 1927 was an increased rainfall in August of 1926. The rains continued for 8 months. Water levels rose to a record high, and levels increased to the point where the water line was touching the top of the levees. The first levee was recorded to break on April 21st of 1927. The first break of these levee systems started a cascading event where even more levees started to fail. The result was over 120 levees breaking altogether. These breaks created a powerful turbulence and force within the river, and the river began to rush towards the south. During the event of the rush, riverbanks and structures were swept away in a blink of an eye. The rapid movement of water made its way to New Orleans. Trusted government leaders and engineers devised a plan to quickly destroy the levees downstream to alleviate any risk of damage and further threat to coming cities. Their attempt of destroying these levees included them blowing them up with dynamite, but this attempt for mitigation did not work. Family homes, livestock, businesses, and crops were all swept away. Over 500 people lost their lives, and over 500,000 lost their homes. Businesses, jobs, and their livelihood was all gone. The majority of the people who were affected lived in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. However, among all of the 7 states that were affected, 700,000 homes and 16 million acres of cropland was destroyed. The result of this was thousands of people homeless and in refugee camps. Along with that came sickness, disease, starvation, and crime. The ones that were the most impacted by this disaster were the African Americans. Over 200,000 individuals needed to be rehomed and put into camps and temporary housing. This major shift in livelihood triggered families to join the Great Migration and travel to other parts of the country to start a fresh new life. In the wake of this disaster, people were in desperate need of help. At the time, Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover stepped in, and he directed efforts to provide flood relief. His vision was to help the refugees and begin the rebuilding of the region.
There is a solution to every engineering problem. And no matter what the cost of flood control, it will not be nearly so much as the loss suffered as a result of this flood, which has rendered hundreds of thousands of good citizens homeless and destitute.
It was thought that his humanitarian efforts are what helped him win presidency in 1929. This disaster is thought to cost the country $400 million in damages, which will result in about $5 billion today. As time led on, much debate and conflicting opinions led to the federal government passing the Flood Control Act of 1928, and construction began the same year. In this act, engineers were granted access to build the world's largest levee system. Within this system, the levees were to divert large floods to areas that were not inhabited to alleviate pressure. Since then, we have made leaps and bounds throughout the decades to assist in flood control. 80 to 85% of the river is still leveed. However, with climate change brings increased frequency in floods. We can see with warmer weather brings more erratic climate changes. Climate changes can increase rainfall, droughts, and regression of forested areas. In turn, these changes can increase these disasters in the future.